On today's show, we're going to be talking about the challenge of selling in design systems and how you make the wider team and your senior leadership care about what you're doing in a way that won't make your design system disappear. I'm Luke Murphy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michelle Chin. We're both design advocates at Zeroheight, the design system management platform, and this is Design Systems WTF. So, Michelle, first episode, first question. How do you make the rest of your org and senior leadership care about design systems? I mean, it's a nice,
Yeah,
easy
I
one
was
to
just gonna
start with,
ask,
right?
like, why did you pick a hard topic to start with? But it is a really important one. I think a lot of people do have this question. And I think it really, I think a lot of times we push for, oh, it's efficiency for designers and developers. And yeah, that's true, but that doesn't affect most of the people, especially senior leadership. They don't really care as much about efficiency because they just want the work to get done. And if the work gets done, the features get shipped, they're happy. So I think it's really coming to understanding kind of, what are their motivations, what are their pains and gains, and how can you relate design system work to that? So,
Yeah, to start with, I mean, the reason that I picked this topic is because we're hearing it a lot at the moment, right? Like, it's a tough climate out there, and I think that especially because design systems, it started not too long ago. I mean, the official atomic design release was what, 2016, when Brad released the book. But even, it's only been 10 years in total since people have been really talking about this and it started to like hit mainstream companies. So it's still relatively new. And I think that we were going through that lovely heyday of people hearing about design systems and hearing it from important people. So going, oh yeah, that's important, we need to do that, without actually thinking about that, how you show the value. And that's what it comes down to, right? It's exactly what you said. It's like, and I think a lot of people don't realize or appreciate this, is that it's you need to understand what the pains and gains are for the people you're talking to, what their motivations are, what they care about, right? And that's different for the different
yeah,
people.
it's super super different. So I guess like I for a while I pitched, efficiency for engineers. Don't you want that? But executives don't really care. So I think it's
Yeah.
like kind of understand like meeting. And what's a good tactic is like I worked with a vice president of design who was like, let's kind of figure out kind of what these executives' motivations are, what's really important to them. And at the time, it was like mergers and acquisitions. So you're like, if we have a design system, we can easily acquire companies and then give them our design system that they can quickly, rebrand their product to be our product. And that was exciting for executives, right? They're just like, oh, yeah, let's fold that in. Because I think looking at that, it's like when they do their performance review with their, I guess, the CEO or something, it's like we folded in this product into our portfolio within 3 months versus 3 years.
Hmm.
And I think also, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I was going to say, and things like I think rebrands as well, like, is one that a lot of people use as a great example, because if you've got the infrastructure of the design system, even though it feels like it might still be a hard thing to do, it makes it so much easier and quicker to end up, especially if you've got things like token sets and whatnot set up. But if you've got strong foundations, it's like it's the same concept with like a merger and acquisition. To stand up a product or a brand becomes so much easier, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then innovations too. So it's like if you have an idea,
Yeah.
if there's already a component library that devs can use, they can quickly make a prototype that looks very realistic, that can, demonstrate the concept pretty easily versus, oh, I have to design all this stuff. I have to make all this stuff. I have to code these components. Yeah, I worked on another product that the product was going to get done by another team who didn't have web
Mm.
development experience. And the web development team that I was on, those developers were going to not have any work. So there was like a little risk of them losing their jobs. So what they ended up doing was they used the design system, coded up the prototype to show that they could make the product on their team versus the
Ah,
yeah, the
of
other
course.
team who they only coded desktop apps, so they weren't coding web apps. So they had to learn. So they had that learning curve. And so the executives realized, oh, this team just did this in like a day and a half. And it was like a working prototype that didn't have everything connected, but the UI was there. And so that work ended up coming to that team instead. And so I think, maybe they were able to keep their jobs. Happy ending.
Which is
Yeah.
always a plus, right? It's funny because we were talking about this the other day, and we've got quite different backgrounds, and that my background is a little bit of enterprise, but mostly sort of startups and scale ups, whereas you've been in the enterprise game for quite a while. And I always had the assumption, and I think a lot of people do, I think a lot of sort of the people who are in the weeds of design systems have this assumption that the thing that people care about is the efficiency and the speed, which you were saying before. And that made sense to me as a way to like sell it into to senior leadership, because when you're in that startup and scale up environment, speed of delivery is such a pain point, and it's such an area that people like, they care so much about improving your processes so that you can ship product faster. But it was something that never occurred to me, that just becomes less of a, I mean, it's still a pain, but it's less of a like burning pain in large enterprise, because I suppose that people get to the point where they understand that it's this stuff takes time, and when you've got large enterprises, you've got lots of moving parts, things just end up being a lot longer. And it was interesting because you shared with me that sometimes it is just playing to stakeholders' vanity as well.
It's kind of funny. Like I think stakeholders like and senior leadership, very different mindset than like the ICs and the makers. We worked on I was on part of an org that worked on a design system where it wasn't ready, but the senior leader insisted that it go public, and everyone's like, well, it has like 2 components and some like color ramps and a typography scale, and that's and he was like, I don't care, it's going live. And so it went live, and then it was really like abysmal for the people who worked on it because everyone knew that it wasn't complete. But I think we realized that this was this person's like legacy piece. Like, so this person, the senior leader, wasn't a designer. They were really high up, and they wanted to establish like a legacy of like, I was part of launching this design system publicly, and it had nothing to do with with the actual product or
But that's the thing, is that it is, and I think that this is something that's really important, and it's something that I've definitely learned over my career, is sometimes the things that you think are the most important aren't the best way to get the job done. And sometimes you just have to work within the constraints that you're given of what the people who make the decisions above you care about. And yeah, sometimes it is playing to people's egos, but sometimes if that's going to get it done and make sure that you're not defunded or deprioritized, hey, it's it's a bad way to get to a good solution. If that makes sense. And I think that I think one of the things that is important as well, and I think that we sometimes get caught up in senior leadership being the only people that we need to convince, or whoever the budget holder is, whoever the decision maker is. But actually, also, there's a big piece around making the rest of your org care, because it's one of those, the easy way to keep a product is if your users are very happy with it, and you have a lot of you have as much penetration as possible into your market. Not to talk about design systems as a product. I know you're not a fan of that,
infrastructure.
But it is, it's also like getting other people on board, but it's the same thing, right? It's understanding the language that they understand and enjoy, their motivation. So therefore, like what it is that you're trying to play to, and the message that you need to sort of send to them. And then I think one that's very tactical but underappreciated is the channels that they actually care about. it feels like a very minor point that shouldn't make that much of a difference. But if you're putting all of your design system communication onto an internal blog that nobody reads, it's not very useful. Not very useful way to spend your time.
Yeah, I think and a lot of it's like trust building too. So depending
Yeah.
on the collaboration and the rapport between design and engineering teams, like that might need to be worked on a little bit more. I've been on teams where we didn't exactly have the greatest working relationship with developers. They just thought we were like, we made things look pretty. And then they also thought we were a bottleneck at one point because it was like, why is design taking so long? So our director kind of forced us to go out to lunch with the developers. So like every 2 weeks or so, we would all go out to lunch, like reluctantly. Um, and like I think over the course of a couple of months, we ended up building a good rapport of getting to know each other. So we established a trust to be like, hey, I'm gonna try this thing, or what do you think about? And this is like before we had a design system. So it was like working toward a design system. So I think there's definitely some ways you can like help win people over to adopt the design system. Hashtag better together for sure. So I think, yeah, that's something, think about that. And like, like kind of what Luke was saying is like, go to where they are, like join their stand-ups, their scrum meetings, their planning, their engineering, monthly team meetings or what have you. Just get a little time. Because I think the other thing is like, chances are engineering managers won't say no. They just don't think to ask you to come. So just, mentioning, hey, I'd like to join and talk about the design system and these coded components or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just for some reason it's just reminding me of like building bridges. And if anybody's watched the amazing series Derry Girls of the Protestants and Catholics coming together, it was hey, we're not getting into that.
Yeah, we only have 30 minutes.
I think that's yeah, exactly. I think that I think it's, and what you're talking about as well is what you mentioned very briefly is around like building community as well. And like that is, I think that's one of the easiest ways. Just build a community. It's super easy. I think that community building is such an important part of setting yourself up for success in the future when it comes to being able to sell in the value of a design system. Because if you have a strong community behind you, you've got those advocates and those champions around the business who are going to be who are going to be there to like fight for your survival and be able to provide those qualitative feedback that you can then give back to your stakeholders. And it got me thinking that basically there is, especially because I don't know if folks are in the startup world, but we talk about this thing called like category creation, right? Which is, when something doesn't already exist and you've got to find that product market fit and create the category. Design systems are still in category creation mode within businesses, right? And so I think that actually it is a part of most, unless you're really lucky and you have amazing design system like understanding, comprehension within your business, there is always going to be an education part. And it made me realize that, similar to what we do at zeroheight, we're in the sort of design relations part, which is strongly built on, dev relations that happens at other companies, any company that has developers as an audience. That's what we do. Like we're all about building community and educating. And it was one of those things that made me go, oh, maybe folks need to read up on developer relations if they're in design systems so that they can learn some of the tactics, running webinars, running Ask Me Anything sessions, writing articles, doing lunch and learn sessions, trying to do that education piece. And I know that, time is tight for everyone. But finding those little ways and the little effective ways to get out there and actually spread the spread the gospel of design systems.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the other thing is like once you get some advocates, like some of your biggest advocates won't be your design system team. It will be others around saying like, I used the React library and it was great. It was awesome. Like it made my job easy, right? And they can go to their managers, their leaders, that way as well. But I think, you know, it is a little bit of work, but I think getting creative. And then if you have, even if you were like, I need ideas, maybe you go to the marketing team. Hey, what's a good way to get engagement? Or program managers are also really good at like coordinating sessions. If you have an idea and you just want to talk about the design system, maybe you have a design ops person that could coordinate the lunch and learns and get things moving.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it, you know, it's one of those things where try a couple things and see what works. And yeah, it also takes a little bit of time too. But I think, you know, everyone gets there at some point.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think what you just said there is super important around the like tests, you know, experiment, fail, iterate. Like that is, it's, God, we're talking about design systems as a product again, Michelle. But it should be infrastructure. But I do think that sometimes the product mentality
Yeah,
actually does make
in
sense.
some aspects, I think my biggest sticking point about calling it a product is that usually like products are like, okay, check, I made it. Now we can move on and do new innovations or new products. And I think that's kind of where a lot
Yeah.
of people, stakeholders, like, oh, I heard, you know, this company said we need a design system. Let's make a design system. Oh, okay, we have a design system. Our work is done. But infrastructure is kind of like that utility. It's like you need plumbing, you need electricity, you need internet, and that needs ongoing maintenance and upgrades. So thinking of it that way just means it's something that has to be part of the foundation to what you're doing.
Oh, it's like music to my ears. So we have a great question here that's building off of the same conversation we've been having around, you know, which companies are building strong relationships between designers and developers the best. Which I think is, you know, we're not going to list off a bunch of companies, but I think that there are some tactics and some markers that sort of show what goes well. I'm just curious, like, well, I mean, apart from actually getting them to talk to each other, are there any other things that you've seen that is like a good practice to get into, or like a good way to get to that harmony between designers and developers?
Yeah, I think I've seen, and I've done this as well, as like, you know, working with engineers and like people early on, just like anyone you can think about,
Yeah.
even if they're not able to contribute, or, you know, it's not the right time for them to come in. So, you know,
Yeah.
like maybe we'll have a content designer who's just kind of going to like one of our, you know, quarterly kickoffs of like, this is what we're going to do. They just kind of sit and listen. So they know by the time we need them to help with content design patterns, they can step in. And then I think engineering realizes that they're part of the conversation early on, that this is very much something that they can contribute to and own as well. And then one company, I would say like, it's like, I'm not going to name them, but like, I don't think they have the best product. But they have the best design team and I love them. They have like, I guess like a dedicated user researcher, a dedicated content person, a dedicated IA, dedicated developers and designers, like dream team design system team. And then product, I'm not really like, I don't know, thrilled about, but you know, I was just like, this is great. And you can tell when I talk to them, the synergy is really great. It's there, people, like it's really, I don't know, it's just like, it just makes me really happy. So I think, yeah, starting
Yeah.
early on is really good.
It is. I think it's like talking in the same language as well. I know one tactic that I've used in the past that works really well is the concept of pairing. Like, I know that it's something that's quite common in engineering orgs for engineers to pair together. One of the things that we started at my last place of work was design engineering. It's good when you've got similar, so like front end engineering and design works very well because you've got a lot of the same problems and you know you understand sort of similar language. But I do think that it's a really valuable way to not only really strengthen those bonds and get that shared language happening and that shared understanding happening on not just like what each other does, but the problem space and the way that you both approach the problem space. But also, and this feels so wrong, but it's you get so much more work done
Yeah.
in those sessions than you do when you're working by yourself, which I don't know, it makes no sense, but it just works. And there must be some science behind it, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is especially with accessibility and making your components accessible. I worked with an engineer and we like pair designed and coded on how to make a toggle accessible. And, you know, it required
Yeah.
them knowing more about like the ARIA attributes. And I am like talking about the experience of like the user with a screen reader should have this experience. And, you know, sorting through things, testing things out. We were like messing stuff up. Like things would work. Like I would test it with a screen reader. They would continue coding. We would test it. It would break. Like, you know, and I think showing that like openness to like learn and learning together and showing that we all make mistakes, that we don't know everything, I think is a really great experience to have a bond over, to be able to work together
Yeah.
better. So
100%. There's another great question here around enhancing adoption by non-designers. So, you know, stakeholders. Well, they're specifically calling out stakeholders, design managers. It's an interesting one. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it,
I
Michelle.
think, you know, it is interesting because it's similar to thinking about kind of like what are their motivations. So if you can think about what they're held accountable for, like product launches, feature launches, and if you can tie some of the work that you're doing or tie the fact that if we adopted this design system, this will be guaranteed to happen on time. Because I think a lot of times,
Yeah.
you know, features and all this stuff kind of get delayed. But showing the value of like, I know your goal is to launch this product by the end of the year, and we're not going to meet that. But if we use a design system, this is how we could meet it. And I think, you know, you don't have to have like accurate like metrics and data like math done. You can do some estimate because like the time it takes to create a component every time versus reusing a coded component, the difference is so big that you don't have to have that accurate, oh, you know, it saved us 6 hours. You can say like it saved us roughly, I don't know, 75% or whatever. But really kind of pulling at
Yeah.
their like what their managers and their bosses are holding them accountable to.
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually. I mean, if you want those stats, just not to plug our own stuff, but we've been collecting loads of case studies that have been pulling those stats. So, you know, we've got them already. Just go onto the case study section in the zeroheight website and you'll have those stats to share. I mean, but I think you're right. Like, I think it's like, don't labor over them too much. I think also like understanding what does adoption mean for those people. Like, I think it's what you're measuring there, whether they look at the documentation or whether they jump into the Figma file, like that probably doesn't matter. It's actually probably more around that, going back to like the education piece. So it's like if you are doing, you know, all hands demos, or if you are doing, you know, learning sessions or whatnot, making sure they're in the room and there's like attendance there, and, you know, probably doing some kind of like qualitative surveys to then sort of gauge how successful that's going. Because I think it is like you need to really understand like how much do they need to care, because there is a threshold there of how much they need to care. And I think that's really important. It's you know, understanding what is it that you need from them in order for you to be successful, which I don't know, sounds a bit transactional, but still it is, you know, when it comes down to brass tacks, that's really what it's about. And I think it's interesting. Like I was talking to a customer of zeroheight the other day, and they were talking about the fact that they did a big survey for everybody in the company who would potentially touch their design system. And one of the questions was just, have you heard of this? And what does it mean to you? And it's the name of their design system. and they were quite shocked at the amount of people who came back and said, "I've never heard of this." And so it showed that they still had some work to do, which is really great. I think we're at time now. So there are some amazing comments and questions in the chat. So we will make sure that we continue that conversation and take some of those into future episodes, as well as continue the conversation on Slack. That's it for today. Thank you so much, Michelle. If you have any questions that you want to fire to us for the next episode, which will be live from Design Matters in Copenhagen, because we're gluttons for punishment, please send it through either via the Zero Slack community, which you can really reach at zeroheight.com/Slack, or on X. I don't know why I'm calling it X. Yeah, Twitter, at zeroheight. We're still on there. We haven't disappeared yet. But until then,
thanks,
see you next time.